Hi, I'm Trent Goodmanson. Thanks for joining me again. I think this is part 4 now of this painting. I'm going to get started on the details. All right, well, I've already behind the scenes gone and darkened these eye sockets here. I ended at a really bad spot at the last segment of the video, and it looked pretty bad. So now I've got those darkened again. They look like real shadows, and we can proceed. A lot of this one is going to be in fast motion. So you can see I'm lightening the chin here. The chin is jutting out a little bit further than what I had indicated earlier. And in general, I'm just lightening the parts that are facing the sky, so facing upward. And again, just darkening the parts that are needing to be in shadow, as well as very slowly putting in some color. I mentioned earlier that the cheeks and noses always are a little bit more red. And so I'm carefully changing the color here and there, adding a little bit of red where it needs it, a little bit of yellow or even sometimes greens. I've started to paint the shirt. I'm making decisions here about what colors to make these shirts. In the photo, they're just black and white, but I'm trying to choose some things that I think would be accurate to the time period and also be interesting. So I've chosen to go with basically a white or a very light gray top for the woman here. I'm just using a real basic gray, using black and white paint. And the shadows are cooler. And I'm showing here with my hands the way that the angle of the sun, or the angle of the light rather, influences how dark or light things are. And with the little girl, I want to make it a little bit different. I mean, they very well might have had the same color of tops on, but I'm trying to make it look like her top is maybe a little bit slightly warm off-white. So this yellow seems to be working. So I think I actually will keep this pretty pure gray just to contrast with this. But because the shadow in here is pure gray, so just utilizing black and white, I'm actually going to warm up the shadow in this part, which is slow and a little bit monotonous maybe. Gonna jump to fast motion here again while I fill this in with a little bit warmer tone. And as you can see there, the shadow now differs from the shadow in the older woman's shirt. It's nice that it is a little bit different, and I actually really like the effect here. Finish off her arm there. All right, now back to the woman's face. Whereas the shadows were pretty stark before, now I'm softening the parts that are in between, making the parts that are more curved be a little bit more subtle, and the parts that are, sunken in, get a little bit more shadow. The parts that need more, just kind of going back and forth, really. In a minute here, I'll zoom in so you can see what I'm doing better. But if I were to try to explain to you what I'm doing in real time, this would probably get really boring. It's really just a lot of the same thing, just fine-tuning, really. It's difficult to explain in very many ways how to fine-tune something. I'm just making it more the right color and the right value, which is how light or dark something is, and the right edge. So color, value, edge. It's really all about just getting those more and more correct. And you can see I've gone much darker in the shaded sides of both faces. Also starting to indicate the hands and fingers here, using my finger to smudge. So getting darker and darker here, I've darkened everything so that I'm going back in again, even darker. And you'll see a little bit later that I'm going to lighten some of those things back up again. So again, just kind of, sometimes I'll go too far on purpose, knowing that I'll be coming back in and fixing it. I like how the girl's face changes so quickly in this little part right here. And go back to the woman. It looks a little bit funny right here, but I kind of have to go. Here we go. Finally, a closer look. I'm having to go a little bit darker and then a little bit lighter, and where I put in the darker hairline, it suddenly starts to affect everything else around it. You can see that I lightened and sharpened the nose and then had to fix the edge afterwards. And then I'm also bringing in some highlights and some color to the cheek and lips. There's not a lot of detail in the photo, but I can imagine that she might have been smiling a little bit more than she is in the photo. It's really hard to say. Putting some color in the girl's cheeks and some warmth in the eye sockets. Actually, it's quite a bit of warmth. It may be a little bit too red, but I can always come back in and fix that. I like to, at least right now, go with a little bit more color and then bring it back as opposed to not having enough to begin with. All right, I want to take a break real quick and show you the whole thing, how it's starting to come together. And for those of you who didn't see the other parts of this, here's my palette. So I usually have purple on here, but I rarely use it. Blue, bluish green, white, black, yellow, red, slightly pinker red, or more cool red. Alizarin crimson is what that's called, a dark cool red, and burnt sienna, warm brown. And here's the photo that I'm working with. So as a plan of attack right now, obviously I need to fill in the parts that aren't colored at all, and there will be quite a bit of darkness up here behind her head, as you can see there. Looks like I'll also have to darken everything here that I spent a few minutes painting this, thinking that it was right, but that's the funny thing. As the painting begins to be built, everything affects everything else, and I've said it a few times, but you can see here how that happens. This looked quite dark before, and now that I've painted these parts darker, that by contrast looks quite a bit lighter, so too light in this case. And I mentioned at one point that the faces looked too dark, but then they would look lighter as I painted in the other things, and you can see that that's starting to happen now. All right, you'll get to see a little bit wider view this time as I fill in the bigger parts that I just mentioned. All right, making the first mark there. You can see how much darker it is already and how much darker I'm going on everything in the background around the woman's head. Now, part of me wants to have her stand out from that background, but I think it was the right decision to go darker on it, closer to the photograph. It's a little bit more realistic in the way it's done, and helps simplify the shapes, and I'll even go darker on the wood in a minute. So I chose green for her. I don't know, I guess it's the skirt, or apron in front of her skirt, and working on her hair a little bit. You saw me darken up the wood. I'm basically just going around in my mind and deciding what, if I had to stop now, what would I most want to have done in the next 10 seconds? What's the most important thing to do? That's kind of always how I go about it. The thing that needs the most attention is usually what gets my immediate attention. You're going to see me working on the folds, and especially this pattern in this dress here. It's really neat. It's remarkably modern, actually, for being almost 200 years old. All right, well, I'm gonna actually jump ahead a little bit. I'm gonna just work in a similar fashion throughout the painting, filling in colors, slowly perfecting the shadows and the highlights, adding color where it needs it. And this will actually take quite a while, several days at least. Then after that, I will show you what I've done and basically a big reveal, and I'll talk about it a little bit. As you can see, I already worked a little bit on this, darkened this because everything else was darker, and as I said, everything affects everything else. I'll be darkening the sky, making this transition softer to look like dustiness in the background. Still work on the faces, details in the hands and feet. Of course, I need to finish the foreground. Actually, there's a lot that needs to be done, but I'll show you that. Actually, not in this video, but I'll end this one for now and get back to you in the next video, again with that big reveal, and we'll talk about it then. All right, thanks again for watching. I will see you real soon.